Welcome to Horror in Detail. Are you ready to embark on a chilling journey into the realms of darkness, the mysterious, and the bone-chilling world of horror stories? On this channel, we are dedicated to unraveling the most terrifying tales that will send shivers down your spine. First story. This story was shared by you/Sam Marduk. Bartending ain't easy in the winter. I exited the back bathroom and saw him. The stranger sat at the previously empty bar. His head was lowered, hiding his face. He wore a military jacket and hood. He had wool gloves, and he was soaked from the sleet outside. "Can I help you?" I was wary of this man. We're a dive bar, but typically that only attracts young rich kids looking to drink in a dank, smelly basement. We don't get legitimately scary customers in here much anymore. I thought I had locked the door, but I just assumed I had forgotten. I made my way behind the bar, trying to get a better view of the man's bearded face. "Whiskey," he muttered out, almost like he hadn't heard me offer help. When a customer asks for a vague drink like whiskey or gin, I tend to upcharge the brand, but this poor bastard was clearly wanting the cheaper option. I poured a shot of brown firewater, and the man drank swiftly. It was now I got a full look at his face in the dim lighting. He was a pale, red-bearded man. He resembled a homeless lumberjack. He was large and looked as though he worked with his hands his entire adult life. He's the kind of character that will either get blitzed and leave without a word or get blitzed and shoot up the place. His eyes met mine. They were bloodshot and had deep, black circles underneath. He stood and dropped a 20 on the bar. "Keep the change," he muttered with his back turned. I noticed now how truly massive this individual was. He stood easily over 6 feet tall and was broad, not fat, but just a wall of a man. He wandered out the door into the blasting sleet, and the door closes behind him. I ran, swiftly locking the door. I still don't know why I felt such unease with the individual at the time, but I soon learned my feelings were well placed. It was a Tuesday, so the bar closed around 2 a.m. I was back at my apartment by 3 and planning to sleep in, when my phone rang. It was the owner. He told me to expect a visit from the police, and that they had questions. Shit. The last thing I enjoy are city cops. It is a constant as a bartender that the police are nearby and hassling patrons, but when they need to see me it is always bad news. They arrived around 6 a.m., no sun yet, and the sleet was still hammering the city. I buzzed them up and invited them inside. "Sir, did you have contact with this man?" They asked, showing a picture of the bearded man from earlier in the evening. "Yes. Why?" "We found his body in an alleyway outside your bar. With the sleet, we can't exactly pin a time of death, but we imagine it was around midnight." It was here I stopped listening. I stopped paying attention because it was now I knew that I had locked the main door before he entered the bar. I did not, however, lock the storage room in between the bar and alley. It was now I know that the man had been dead long before I locked the door behind him. The cop was still talking while I felt the $20 bill in my pocket. "Sir." My head snapped to attention and met the officer's gaze. "Sorry." I trailed. "We're investigating the strong possibility that this is a homicide. Can you tell us if anything unusual happened during this man's visit?" "No." I answered honestly. Clearly, I couldn't tell them I served whiskey to an angry ghost. Clearly, they wouldn't believe I knew why he was killed. Obviously, they wouldn't be understanding to the fact that those rich kids like to beat homeless men to death and that I've been looking the other way for years. Just sad that this poor bastard actually had a dime to his name when he died. Second story. This story was shared by you/Pros40745. Winter's Woman. I'm old now. My bones creak and groan when I stand. My skin has become gray, hanging looser with every passing year, and the mere thought of stairs knocks the wind right out of me. But my mind is still as sharp as the day I met Rachel. It's been snowing for 3 long days. Every morning I open the curtains hoping to see some sign of a break, but all I'm met with a white blanket which lies a few inches higher each time I peek out. Must be 4 feet of it by now. There's dishes piling up in my kitchen sink, and my toilet is littered with empty pill bottles that I haven't been able to refill, pain meds and the like for my joints that always flare up right when I can't get out the house. Last winter was the same. I actually ended up spending a few days in the hospital, with pain so bad in my legs I wasn't able to walk. When the weather is like this, an old-timer like me is all but housebound, and I'm left to rattle around this place with nothing but my television, my tea, and my journal. There's also hurt now. If you'd have told me that I'd believe in the paranormal, even as little as a week ago, I would have probably laughed in your face. However, here I am, sharing my experiences of my encounters with an otherworldly presence. Rachel had always been the more open-minded one. There's no denying what I've seen these past couple of days. On Monday, I saw her for the first time. Initially, I was sure it was my imagination when, from the corner of my eye, a shape floated across my living room and into the kitchen of my little house. With more curiosity than fear, I shuffled along the same path, my worn old, world's greatest dad mug of tea in hand. The mug met the hardwood floor after my eyes adjusted to my kitchen. Well, I say my kitchen, but it wasn't. Not really. It was the same shape and size, the same fridge that I have now stood in the same corner, and my oven was where it's always been. But everything seemed dated but cleaner. The white of the fridge was more brilliant, and the oven was free from the greasy buildup I was used to. The walls had a fresher coat of lime green paint, and a large clock hung above a small table that I never recognized. I was taken aback by this so much that I almost didn't see her at first. A pretty young woman, probably in her 20s, dressed in a silky black nightgown, stood pouring drinks by the sink. Her black hair sat in curls above her shoulders. Her skin was a lovely glowing white, and her big green eyes dazzled behind her long lashes. But something was off about her, and it was unsettling me. There were 2 empty flutes on the worktop, and it seemed she was carefully filling them, but there was nothing in her hands, and the flute stayed empty. When she noticed me, a wry smile grew across her face, and she spoke softly. "Hey there, stranger." The voice that flowed from those soft ruby lips just seemed wrong. It was too deep, or was it too high? I just couldn't tell. I stammered, looking for something to say, but my body was pulling me backwards. My eyes darted over everything and my stomach churned. A fear that I can't recall ever feeling before coursed through my body. The gray hair on my arms to stand on end, and the teeth I had left began to chatter. Who? What? And just like that, she was gone. The room returned to its sorry state, and I was alone again. I know it wasn't the drink that was making me see these things, because I hadn't touched a drop in months, maybe years. What was even stranger, though, was the feeling of calm, and how quickly it returned as soon as I was back in the living room. Her pretty face was a welcome sight for me, and it brought me a comfort I couldn't figure out. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen her before, not in the same manner, but on television or in a magazine. Maybe it was her smile that reminded me of Rachel's. I spent the rest of that night trying to place her face before drifting off in my armchair, quite blissfully. The snow still fell heavily. The drink had cost me my first marriage. We were high school sweethearts and married in the summer we left, but we were just a bit too alike for our own good. She was one of the popular girls, pretty and blonde, and I was one of the popular guys, loud and confident. She liked to drink and get into fights, and I was more than happy to indulge her. We would spend entire weekends downing cheap whiskey and hopping from bar to bar. She would slap any girl who looked my way, and I would burst any guy's nose who looked hers. As you can imagine, I lost a lot of jobs and a lot of friends, and when I woke up one morning alone in our bed, but for a post-it note with some drunkenly scribbled apology, I knew she was gone. I went off the deep end then. It was the early 70s, and drugs like cocaine and weed were becoming easy to come by if you ran in the right circles. Well, wrong circles, really. I drank and snorted my way through the years, working shit jobs and losing them just as quick. These years are a bit of a blur to me now, a dark time in my life that I don't like to look back on. I have a habit of burying the parts of my past that I'm not too proud of. I wondered if the woman in my kitchen was from these times, a ghost from my past, but I'm sure I would have remembered that face. It was Rachel who saved me from myself. I woke up one Sunday spring morning in a hospital bed with a sore jaw and broken hand. It didn't take me long to piece together why I was there, even if the booze had stripped my brain of the memories. Hers was the first face I saw that morning, and almost instantly I knew it was a face I wanted to see every morning for the rest of my years. Her red hair danced like flames in the wind, and it may have been the pain medicine, but I could have sworn she was illuminated in a white light. She approached my bed and checked the bag of fluid that hung from a hook above me. "How are you feeling?" she asked, with only a hint of care in her voice. "A lot better now." She smiled, and that was that. I was hooked, and I spent the rest of the day desperately trying to get her to go out on a date with me. It took until a few minutes before I was discharged on the Monday for her to agree. "Okay," she said in her soft way, "one drink on Friday, but you better promise me you won't end up like I saw you yesterday morning." Of course I agreed. And of course we had a great night until, of course, I went over the edge on whiskey and punched a young guy at the bar, with my good hand, for staring at her legs. I woke on the Saturday in love for the first time in my life, but with the feeling I had blown it. I had hazy memories of being thrown out the pub and the back of her head as the taxi she had bundled me in sped away. She always said she saw a goodness in me. From the moment we first met, she used to tell me. That's why she gave me another chance, and this time around I grasped it with white knuckles. I quit drinking, held down a steady job, and spent every moment I could with her. Unlike my first wife, she was pretty much my opposite. She was quiet, reserved, and carried a more subtle confidence. It was just what I needed. She made me the man I am today. We married in 1973 and had our only child, John, in 74, and the next 18 years were the happiest of our lives, one that I knew I probably didn't deserve. Then Rachel got sick. I'm sorry, I ramble a lot these days. One thing sets me off and I can talk for hours. That's one of the things I remember about my old man. He passed around the age I am now, and I remember how weak and frail he looked compared to the strong brute of a man with the powerful hook I had grown up with. He would go on and on about the people he'd met and sights he'd seen in the wars, and I would get bored and drift off. It's sad how we become our parents. I had bought this house in 1992, but it wasn't a home. John got a job in the city, and traveling there and back to our family home in the suburbs was too much for him. So I looked around, and this house was selling for a very reasonable rate and seemed ideal for him. He was only in here a couple of months before his mother got sick. He quit his job and moved back into our place to help care for her. He knew I wasn't up to the task. This house sits only a short train ride from the city center, but is far away enough to be quietly peaceful. This place had lain empty for years until I decided that our family home was too big to rattle around myself in, so I sold up and retired to spend the rest of my years here, alone. John never spoke to me much after Rachel passed, anyway. On Tuesday, when the snow was built up around a foot or so but coming down a little lighter, I saw the woman again. This time she was in my living room. Again, it was my living room, but with changes in details like before. For example, the carpet was nicer and the TV was chunkier. As with the kitchen, everything just seemed a little dated but cleaner. She was wearing the same nightgown as she danced around the room, floated really. She wore a smile on her face, and I couldn't help but feel at ease. "I love this song," she screamed as she moved rhythmically around the couches, her hips swaying and her arms above her head. I couldn't hear any music. "What are you doing here?" I spoke with a warmer tone than I would have expected. "I like it here." I was about to ask if she had once lived in this house, but something caught my attention on her face. A darkened circle around her left eye, like a shadow cast on the snow outside. "What's that?" I gestured towards the bruise. It felt so automatic the way I spoke, like I had no control over what was coming out my mouth. She stopped dancing almost immediately, her aura dimmed and her arms folded as she shrunk into herself. He was angry. She trailed off. "Who was? Did someone hurt you?" And just like before, she was gone in a blink, and I was back in my living room alone once more. I couldn't quite understand why my heart never ceased in fear when I saw her. I mean, for all intents and purposes it really should have. Maybe it was an age thing, but there was something comforting about her, at first anyway. So, for the rest of Tuesday, I searched the house for clues as to who my mystery guest could have been. I didn't have many things, but what I did have was mostly carelessly scattered on the floors or stuffed in cupboard spaces and under beds. I found the box early on Wednesday morning, stuffed away at the bottom of a hallway cupboard. It was still dark outside, but a faint light shone through a crack in the curtains which told me the sun would rise soon. I dragged it into the living room and blew the dust off the top. It was an old-style banker's box filled with old photo albums and trinkets. There was a trophy John had won at a chess tournament when he was 15, shaped like a rook, tucked away at the side. The ability to play chess was probably the only ever good thing I passed on to him. We used to spend whole summers practicing strategies when he was younger. The photo albums were all dated around the early 1990s. They ranged from summer 90 to winter 94. I hadn't seen these in years. In fact, I can't even remember taking these from the old house. I took a trip down memory lane. I studied every photo and the little messages Rachel had written on the back. Summer 90 was filled with pictures of John and I watching the World Cup. He was draped a Brazil top that was 3 sizes too big for him. Brazil win again was neatly wrote on the back of this one, in Rachel's lovely handwriting. In winter 92, I found a picture of him clutching a Nirvana LP that we had gotten him for his birthday. I had forgotten that smile of his. Oh no, Dad will regret it when this starts playing in the same neat writing on the back. I was avoiding winter 94. I knew it would be too emotional for me to handle, but I hadn't realized that autumn 93 would be as bad. It started off pretty normally, just pictures of us laughing at the beach at her dad's birthday, but then I noticed one photograph in particular. Rachel still had that warm beam on her face, but her cheeks looked a little hollow and her eyes were heavy. I was stood behind her with a half smile on my face, a bottle of beer in my hand. As I flicked through the next photos, Rachel was wearing away before my eyes, and my face grew duller and sadder. John was in most of them. A cheery, youthful smile and a mop of black hair was a constant. By the time we got to the last few, I had stopped appearing, and on the rare occasions I did, my eyelids would be half shut and I would be clutching a bottle of booze with a scowl upon my lips. Tears were streaming across my wrinkled face as I opened winter 94. The women and I'd fallen in love still wore a warm smile as the picture showed he lying in a hospital bed, but the rest of her was unrecognizable. The flaming hair I knew was all but extinguished. Now there was wispy strands that protruded from her exposed scalp. John was still there, still smiling. Nothing was written on the back of this one. I wanted to stop flipping these pages, but I also knew I deserved this punishment. Her illness was too much for my weak mind to take, and I had returned to my immature ways. I don't really even remember these days. As I flipped to the second last page, my heart finally did seize in fear. There she was, smiling back at me with that black hair and those ruby lips. The picture was of Rachel, John, and the girl all smiling with their arms around one another. A birthday cake sat upon Rachel's lap, with one single candle in it. My heart raced. Did I know what I was going to see already? I indulged the obvious and flipped over the glossy print. Finally, John introduces me to his girlfriend, in that all-too-familiar handwriting. And then, like I was becoming accustomed to, the room was back to the way I had seen it, and I felt like I could almost feel the nicer, thicker carpet underneath my feet. She was stood with her back towards me, inspecting something above the fireplace and muttering softly. She wasn't wearing that skimpy nightgown this time. Rather, a baggy worn jumper and a pair of loose-fitting jeans hung off her. You know he hit me, don't you? Her voice broke the silence and then trailed off as she turned to show me what she had been inspecting. Her face was a much grimmer sight now. Her mascara was streaming down her cheeks and her black hair clung to her head in messy knots. Then she raised the chess trophy, gesturing towards John's name on it. My John couldn't have, my voice trembles. She loosened her grip, and the trophy fell but vanished before it reached the ground. Before I had time to think, she was upon me, inches from my face, red eyes beaming hellfire. Coward! She screamed so loud that a pressure erupted in my inner ear. I could feel the warmth of her breath burn my cheeks. I could smell the whiskey which stung my nostrils. Then she backed up a few yards. I want to speak, but fear had gripped me. She tilted her head to the side, mouthing what I'm sure was "help me," and her eyes started to gray over. Her skin, once a brilliant white, was turning to a pale sickly shade. Her left eye then darkened before me, turning from a light purple to a deep black. Then it happened, a sight I'll take with me to my grave. Her cheekbone beneath her left eye started to cave in. White skin was being replaced by thick red blood and bone as she screamed silently. And it kept going and going, like a cliff edge crumbling away. Her once beautiful face was turning into a bloody mess as she silently begged for my help. "Stop! Leave me alone!" I bellowed, turning away in horror. And like that, I was alone again. And now here I am. I've been sitting here with my phone in one hand and a yellowing piece of paper with John's number in the other, and I just can't bring myself to phone him. I start to press the keys, and then the thoughts rush into my head. What do I say to him? Do I just ask the question that's been burning the back of my brain for the last few days? I have the sense to phone his landline. I doubt he'd answer his mobile if he saw my name flash upon his screen. I inhale the last of the whiskey that swirls in my tumbler and quickly input his number before I have a chance to change my mind. I strike dial and take a deep breath as I try to calm my beating heart. "Hello." He answers groggily after 3 long rings. "Hi, John. It's me." There's a moment of silence before he hisses, "Do you have any idea what fucking time it is?" I really don't. I can hear his wife in the background, angrily asking who he's talking to. "It's him," John says, and it cuts me a little deeper than I let on. I know the face that bitch will be pulling right now, rolling her eyes then slamming her head back into the pillow. There's a ruffling noise and I presume that he's out of bed and walking into his hallway. "What the hell do you want?" I was just wanting to talk. It's been a while, hasn't it?" "Yeah, Dad, pretty much an entire goddamn year." He is probably right, but I can't even recall the last time we spoke. A whole year, I force on a chuckle, and before he has time to growl something back and I ask, "How are the kids?" "They're fine. Look, you know I don't have anything to say to you." Well, what it is, you see, I'm searching for the correct words and it feels like I'm walking on cracking ice. I was just, taking a trip down memory lane and I came across these old photo albums. There's picture of you as a kid and me and your mother, before you know. I pause for long enough for him to say something, but he doesn't. Anyway, I came across this album from '94, and there's this picture dash. He cuts me off there. "I'm sorry. Did you just say you were taking a trip down memory lane in '94? Look, John. No. You look here, old man. You can't possibly be taking a trip down memory lane because you weren't fucking there to share these memories, were you? Well, there's some time dash. No. You want to know my memories of 1994? They're of me spending my 18th birthday dragging you out of that shithole pub you pretty much lived in. They're of me having to pick you up from the side of the road after you've went and got yourself a beating on the morning that my mother and your fucking wife died. Now it is my turn to be silent. You weren't there, Dad. You were drinking yourself stupid in that bar when she was dying, and on the day she died, and on the day we buried her. And I'll say the same thing I said to you after you never showed at her funeral. You're my father in title only, and I want nothing more to do with you." I know every word he says is the truth, and it hurts like hell, but I still need to know. "The girl, with the black hair, your girlfriend." What did you just say? I can hear the sharp intake of breath from his nostrils. I can sense that he's tensing up. "There's a photo of you and her with your mother. I can't recall her. Whatever happened between you two?" There's a long silence. I have no clue what's going to come next, and I prepare myself for whatever's coming my way. "Are you kidding me? Is this why you phoned me? Are you just trying to mess with me?" "No, I was just wondering." "Are you wanting that bitch's number or something, you old perv?" "No, Dad. I don't know whatever happened to her. She could be dead in a fucking ditch for all I care." And with that he hangs up, not one more word. The snow is pretty light now. I've lost track of the hours. I've just been sitting in the dark getting drunker and drunker on this cheap whiskey that I had stashed away for emergencies, and I think this qualifies. I refuse to believe my John is capable of something so vile. At least I think I do. I can remember how he used to remind me of my younger self when he was around 15. He would steal booze from our cupboards and weed from my drawer. I would always try to scold him, but I think he saw through it. I'm contemplating just leaving the house. I'll force the door open and make my way through the snow to a neighbor's. But then what will I say? The situation is totally absurd, but I feel threatened now. The last time I saw her, she seemed like she wanted to hurt me. and it felt like she really could have. The morning Rachel died, I woke up in a bus shelter a few hundred yards from the pub I was a regular at, not far from this house either. I woke up with a fuzzy head, nausea, and a painful nose which had obviously met an angry man's fist the night previous, all of which I had been accustomed to. It was the buzzing of my phone that eventually brought me to. It lay on the floor vibrating around in circles the way those old Nokias used to. I remember fumbling groggily at it with my hand without even looking up, instinctively pushing the red key to stop my torment. A sharp pain through my fingers told me something was wrong, and when I finally saw my hand, the alcohol which was festering in my stomach retched upwards. My fingers were bent and twisted. Dried blood coated my knuckles and lined my fingernails. My shirt had patterns of bloody spirals sprayed over the torso. I felt at my nose and winced at the pain. It was definitely broken too and crusted with more dried blood. Waking up hungover after being beaten up in a bar fight was an all too familiar scenario for me, and I remember thinking that I probably got the guy good, judging by the damage on my hands. The phone began ringing again, and I got the impression that it had been doing so for hours. The screen revealed that I had 1 missed call from Rachel, 31 missed calls from John, and a number of voicemails and texts. I knew it had happened straight away. For weeks afterwards, I would torture myself listening to those voicemails. It was mostly John, the first few being relatively calm and asking me to get in there quick as something was wrong. Then as they went on, he got angrier, screaming that I was nothing but a drunk fool. I remember the venom in his voice so clearly. He really did hate me then. The last voicemail from him was oddly calm, though. "She's dead," he said in a matter-of-fact way. "You managed to let her down even in death. Well done." Then there was Rachel's. It was so calm and understanding. She told me she loved me and that she wanted me to be happy. "Move on," she said softly. I could hear her voice wavering as she struggled for air. "Don't let this be the end for you too. You don't need me. You're a strong man, and you can fight these demons. Don't let them beat you." The house is silent, but I can hear me heart thud in its cage. I sit in a state of anticipation. "Fuck it," I say to myself as I raise my old bones from the seat and make a move for the door. I try to think of anything to distract me. I open the door and suddenly there's no snow, and she's standing there, inches from my face. "You think you can just leave me?" I stumble back into the living room, but she's already standing by the old fireplace. "You're a coward. Do you know that?" she whispers. "He's my son." She cocks her head, scowling. Again, she's dressed in jeans and an old jumper. Her hair is wet, and the mascara still runs. "Coward." Without warning, she launches something that I hadn't seen her holding. It is on course to make contact with my face, so I threw my arms up defensively. It never hits. And by the time I lowered my hands, she's out of my sight, save for her feet, which I can see pointing toward the ceiling as she lies on her back. The couch blocks my view, and I timidly make my way forward to get a better look. I don't understand why I don't run as fast as my old legs can carry me. It feels like I'm supposed to see this. I eventually make her out. I see that she's mouthing the word "help" over and over. "He's my son." I scream again, the words forcing themselves from my throat even though I beg them not to. Then her face starts to cave in below the eye again, and a pool of crimson surrounds her head from below as it soaks into the thick carpet. She looks like a stained glass window from the church grounds where Rachel rests. Then in an instant she's behind me, dancing around the room once again, scantily dressed and glowing. Then she's sitting on the couch sipping wine. Then she's on the flooring writhing in agony. Then she's by the fireplace inspecting that trophy. Then she's dancing. It all begins to merge, her screaming, her laughter, her anger. A crescendo of emotions rises and swirls, and the room buzzes and pressure builds in my head, and I start to scream and scream and scream. Then I'm alone again. I'm on my knees in front of the fireplace with tears welling in my eyes. I hear John's voice, softly at first. "Hello. What's going on?" I look down and notice the phone is in my hand. A line opened up between us that I can't remember making. "Dad, what the hell are you playing at?" I raise it slowly to my mouth, my voice trembling. "What did you do to her?" "To who?" he shouts. "The girl with the black hair." There's a long silence. I can hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "This, again?" He hisses, "Old man, you were losing your fucking marbles. Do you know that?" "John, please just tell me, did you hurt her?" Another long silence. "Listen, you senile old bastard. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you asking me if I hurt a girl who I used to date over 25 years ago? Do you have any idea what you sound like?" I can help Dash. "I think it's time you go into care, Dad. You remember what happened last year? You need help." "Is this little shit trying to put me away? You killed her, didn't you?" I ask as bluntly as I can. He's silent again, but I can hear the sound of air being pushed from his nostrils as he laughs. "You've officially lost it. No, I didn't kill her, and you know this. I haven't seen her since she left a few days before Mom died. Do you seriously need me to keep telling you what happened? I just need to know the truth." That seemed to push him over the edge, and he screams down the line. "I told her to leave because I knew you were fucking her behind my back, Dad." My head begins to buzz again. Pictures begin to flood my mind again. The room starts spinning again. He continues his angry burst. "You two were fucking for weeks while Mom was dying in the hospital. Your own wife." No, that can't Dash." "What, did you forget I knew?" he asks, laughing. "You senile old bastard. Can't you remember? I would have beat your ass, but the next time I saw you after I found out I was picking you up from that bus stop, someone had beaten me to it." He took another pause. "Mom was the one that told me. You know." My heart began racing, my life crumbling before my eyes. "Did you know your wife told me this on the morning she died? She told me she knew where you were and who you were with?" When I found out, I knew that I had lost both my parents that day. More pictures sear my mind. The women in her nightgown, my arms around her waist, how soft her skin felt in my hands, how warm her lips were as we kissed. My only regret is that bitch ran away before I got to tell her that I knew. She was spineless, like you. Oh, I just wish I could have got to see the look on her face. I can't speak. The phone falls from my hand as the memories flood in. She's at the fireplace again, and now I can what she's about to throw. It's John's chess tournament, and it's arrowing toward my face, and it feels so familiar. I throw my arms up, and it strikes heavily under my wrist, and I can feel the pain sear up the bone. It was a pain I had felt before. Then she's gone again, and so is the trophy. All that's left is the semicircular shaped old scar under my wrist. A wound that's long since closed, but the memory is etched on me forever. This is when the whole picture reveals itself. There is no ghost, no haunting. These are just my memories. I remember the little glances she'd make sure I noticed, and the way she lingered when she put her hand on my arm. It would make me feel alive and young again. The memory of sitting in the kitchen, drunk on whiskey and teary-eyed after Rachel went for her first overnight stay in the hospital. John was in the shower when she walked in and passionately kissed me for the first time. I could still taste her cherry lip gloss. Then a brief flash of a doctor telling me I had the disease I'd been dreading whilst I sobbed into my wrinkled hands. Then I recalled the night she turned up to this house, with nothing more than jacket and a nightgown on. I blackened because of John's whiskey. I consoled her and we danced and made love while Rachel lay in hospital. "He hit me, you know," she sobbed. "My John couldn't have," I replied. Then my stomach sinks as I recall the night she came over in jeans and an old jumper. How she had stood by the fireplace inspecting that trophy that I was so proud of. That night, I think it all became too much for me. My mind was starting to buckle with all the horrible realities that snowed down upon me. I was a lousy cheater and a drunk. I had always been. "The guilt is killing me," I said. "Let's just call it quits and pretend these past few weeks never happened." "You think you can just leave me?" she screamed. "I think Rachel knows." "You're a coward. A coward. He's my son." That's when she threw it. "What the hell are you doing? You're just using me like your son does then. Yeah? The two of you are so alike, you know that? You don't care for anyone but yourselves. Look, just calm down. Don't do anything stupid. Please." "I'll tell them the truth then. I'll do what you don't have the balls to." She took out her phone and began dialing. Clear as day, now I remember what I did. I picked up that trophy and rushed at her, bringing it down just under her eye. There was a horrible cracking sound as she fell to the floor. I couldn't allow her to tell Rachel. I just couldn't. "Help me!" She screamed agonizingly in vain, more out of instinct than anything else, I presume. Then I was on top of her and bringing it down on her face again as she continued to mouth the words. I brought the trophy down on her face again, and she stopped. Again I did it, and again, and again. It was so frenzied. I never even felt the trophy crash against my own nose, or how my fingers were crushed between the base and her skull. I began shaking now, muttering to myself that it couldn't have been me. I remember sitting covered in a mix of our blood as the crimson halo reaches around her head and into the carpet. The first thing I did was wash the blood off the trophy in the kitchen sink, then replace it on the mantel. Next, I emptied her handbag on the couch and put her house keys to one side and threw the rest on top of her before cutting a large section of carpet, rolling her lifeless body up and stuffing it in the boot of her car. Now I'm running to my front door, as fast as my old legs can carry me, trying to outrun the past. I think I am screaming, but there's too much noise inside my head to tell. I went to her flat and packed a suitcase with as much as I can. It was easy. The poor girl never had many things. I drove to an old quarry with a deep lake on the edge of town and rolled her car into the watery grave. Christ, I can't believe how calm I was. I'm outside, so deep in the snow I can barely walk. The white mounds only break for small patches of wet ice, reflecting my image back at me the wrong way around. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm in a desperate hurry. I'm fairly certain I'm screaming now. I walked back to my house. It took hours, and I remember that it all finally sank, and when I had nearly made it, I slumped down in a bus shelter and sobbed until I fell asleep, still covered in blood and cuts. I woke up to John phoning to tell me that my wife was dead. The snow has completely stopped now. The sky is clear, and I can see the stars above me. Neighbors are looking at me from behind their curtains and their doors as I stand near enough up to my waist in the snow. I don't know how long I've been here. A distant scream of a siren can be heard, probably an ambulance for me. I can't feel my legs anymore, only a burning pain. The pain is so familiar to me. Third story. This story was shared by you/far_replacement 8951. Winter Wonderland. Audio recording number 1. File name, Kamina. Date, 1979. This is the first audio recording for this session. I'm conducting a research project for a private company. This research will involve strange occurrences and paranormal actions, among other things. The audio recordings I'm making aren't necessarily for this project. It is mainly for me and to keep track of this research. I do not feel the need to state my name, as these recordings will not be made public. Now with the introduction out of the way, the research I am doing is with a company that primarily produces filming equipment and camera film. But this is a front, is what I am told. This company uses this cover front to do experiments. No, I'm not talking about experiments on dogs and small rodents. These experiments include live humans, mixed in with some alien captures. This company brought me on as a lead researcher for my extensive background. Money is money, and I could care less about what they do. The experiments they do splice human DNA and some elements of alien DNA together. This I have no idea why they do. It isn't for the government is what I'm told. They're an independent company and have no relations to the U.S. government, or any government for the matter. Like I said, I could care less. All I care about is the money and my share of it. Yes, there are others like me they have brought on, but none are as high-paying as myself. Audible sound of a glass clinking and papers rustling. More sounds of glass clinking. Experimentation's purpose is unknown, and there are some reports of them being released into the wilderness. These experiments have come into contact with humans. Most of these contacts end up with the human dead or missing. I have heard some people making it out alive and blabbering to others about it. But most of the time, they aren't believed. I myself have seen these creatures. They are mainly in large test tubes that reach from the ceiling to the floor. The liquid in the test tube is unknown to me after I've tested it. It has a mucus-like texture to it, and it seems to preserve the creatures within it. Well, it seems to preserve pretty much anything put into it. I once witnessed a human child be put into the tank, conscious and breathing. Next thing I knew, the child was still, as if he were dead. I asked a nearby scientist if the child was alive, and all the scientists said was maybe, and didn't say anything else. A large thud is heard, along with what sounds like a small gasp. Where the experiments take place are confidential. Even I can't say the exact location in my own recordings. All I can say is that the location is somewhere in the North Carolina wilderness near a state park. The reason behind the placement of this is because state parks are a great cover-up. They could just slap a "Do Not Trespass" sign, and most people will abide by that. In my experience, people don't want to get on the bad side of a game warden. From what I heard, the game wardens around this area are paid off, or part of the company. Most of the location is underground, with several levels. I mostly do my research on the B level. This level is mostly populated with other scientists and employees. There are some test tubes with creatures in them, but some are wheeled away to sea level. Sea level is where everything happens. The splicing of DNA, the test tubes, among other experiments. I try not to go down there. The whole place is creepy, and it gives off a weird feeling that runs down my spine. It feels colder and damper down there. Now, most of the longer working employees say it doesn't bother them, and that I'll get over that feeling soon. Small cough, but I don't believe I ever will. I feel this is a good spot to stop this recording. There isn't much to say, as I am still fairly new to this project. Once I have enough to talk or report about, I will come back to this. Inaudible mumbling, and what sounds like someone fumbling to turn off the recording. End of audio recording number 1. Kamina, 1979. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/lethargic_bugbear. Beware of grunting noises in the winter. I'm old. 87 to be exact. I didn't know Reddit existed until last Tuesday when my orderly sat down at my bedside and started scrolling. To be honest, I don't like it when they do that. They say everybody does it nowadays, but I think one should look another person in the eye when they're having a conversation. Anyway, I learned how to use a laptop a few years ago. I don't have any relatives, and since one need to be online these days to do anything at all, I decided to learn how to use a computer and how to be online. And now I'm about to die. They say it's cancer, but it doesn't matter. I'm old, and I'm dying. Simple. I'm almost ready for it too. It's just that I have a story to tell and no one to tell it to. So I'll write it here if that's all right. When I was a young boy, I lived with my parents up in the north where my father worked at a sawmill, as his father did before him, and actually even his father before him. The winters were long, and if we got a lot of snow during the coldest months, we had trouble getting anywhere. One day my grandmother Elisa died, and of course it was during those cold months. We couldn't bury her at the cemetery since we couldn't get to the cemetery, and the ground frost made it impossible to bury her anywhere in the ground where we could get to. So we built a snow mausoleum and put her in it as a temporary solution. That was a mistake. I don't know what we should have done, but what we did was not right. In the night that followed, I woke up and the house was pitch black. Normally, we had some candles and a few paraffin lamps so that we weren't completely in the dark. But now it was pitch black. And not only that, it was also dead silent. Not one snore, not one squeaking bed. That's when I heard the grunting noises from outside. Grunting noises in the wilderness is normal. It can be anything from a badger to a moose or a bear if you're unlucky. So I actually found the grunting noises comforting since I was inside. It meant that I wasn't dreaming or going insane. I was still in my parents' house in the woods, safe and sound. But what I should have known then that I have realized later on is that there is no animal that is in its rut during the winter, and both badgers and bears hibernate during these cold months. So it is very unusual to hear animal grunting noises in the winter. But I didn't think of that then. Since I felt that the grunting was not unusual but rather interesting, I went downstairs to have a look. There I found the rest of my family standing in the living room looking out through the window. All of them dead silent and equally dead still. What is happening? I asked. Or rather, I tried to ask, but my father threw himself over me and gripped my entire jaw with his hands and covered my mouth. He looked me straight in the eyes with a stare that meant absolute panic. I looked at my mother that was still staring out the window, tears now running down her face. She did not make a sound. Everything was quiet. Even the grunting noises had stopped. My father, who saw that I understood the need to be quiet, let me go and raised himself up to look out the window. I did the same. It looked like a bear sitting in the spot where the mausoleum had stood. The building was completely ruined now, and in the midst of the remaining piles of snow it sat. But even though it was a clear night, it was hard to see any details because of the trees. One weird thing, though, was that it sat cross-legged. I could clearly see its knees poking out on both sides of it. It sat completely still, and it felt like it had its eyes fixed on us, like it was deciding what to do next. Then it got up and stood on its hind legs, and the moonlight hit its face. Everyone in the room held their breath. It looked like a bear, but it was smiling. I swear it was smiling. Not like an animal that you can see is happy. No, this was a real human-like smile. It was looking straight at us now, and I could feel vomit creeping up in my throat. My mother had started crying silently, and my dad held his arms around her in a way that looked like he was equally trying to comfort her and equally trying to muffle the little sound she made. The bear stood there for what felt like maybe 15 minutes, but was probably more like 3. Then it walked away, still on its hind legs. The next day, my father and grandfather walked out to the burial site to see what was left of it. Us children were not allowed near it, but since my mother was quite upset, I could easily sneak away. I hid near the site behind a large rock and heard my father and grandfather talking. What shall we tell the others? Look at the trails. The thing dragged her with it when it left. My grandfather said solemnly. My father said nothing for a while, and then he said, "This was a hungry bear who has woken up too early. There is nothing else for it to eat now, so it came here. We will tell them that and forbid them from going outside after sundown." My grandfather said nothing in response, but I could tell he didn't like what my father had said. They shoveled all the remaining snow from the mausoleum into a big pile. That pile remained there until spring, when it melted away. We had a proper funeral for Elisa, of course, but with an empty casket. They have always maintained that it was a bear, but I don't know. I know bears can sit cross-legged. I know they can walk on their hind legs. I know they can make funny faces, and I know they can grab things. I really don't know what I believe, but one thing I will say, beware of grunting noises in the winter. Whatever it was that night, it ate my grandmother's corpse. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/FoggyGlassEye. The Girl in the Snowstorm. I've seen her again. The Girl in the Snowstorm. I didn't know that I was in danger the first time I saw her. On the contrary, it was an experience that I kept thinking about all winter. It was over a decade ago, and I was visiting a friend that morning to drop off a Christmas present for him. It was a few miles from home, but I enjoyed the walk, despite it being an even colder winter than usual. My mother had warned me to return home soon, as the local news was predicting a blizzard that evening, so I kept my visit brief and started home that afternoon. By the time I'd made it halfway, the wind was brutally cold, and the snow was falling so heavily that I could barely see where I was. It was too late to turn back and bunker down at my friend's place, so I had to keep walking home. I wore glasses back then, switched to contacts a few years back, and had to take them off. It was bad enough to see everything as white blurs, but it was impossible to see anything through wet, snow-covered lenses. Walking through a blizzard without being able to see is a helpless feeling. You can only hope that you're heading the right way, fighting the wind not just to stay upright, but to make sure that you don't lose your sense of direction. You can't see the nearby buildings very well, and you're constantly on the lookout for familiar sights that can tell you where you're at. I followed the sidewalk as best I could, occasionally stepping off the curb or onto someone's lawn. It was in this blurry haze of wind and snow that I first saw the girl. The first thing I noticed was the red scarf, blowing madly in the wind. She was walking in the opposite direction, and at first, it looked like she was on the other side of the street. The closer she got, the more I questioned what direction I was looking in. Was she crossing the street, or was I not walking on the sidewalk anymore? I could barely tell where I was. I took a moment to make sure I was still on the sidewalk, and by the time I confirmed where I was, the girl was only a few yards away. I could see her more clearly. She was wearing a mismatched assortment of winter clothes, and a lot of layers, even 2 hats. Her puffy blue jacket was oversized and unzipped, and underneath I can see that she was wearing another heavy coat. She didn't look intimidating at all. On the contrary, she looked vulnerable. She was short and notably thin, almost unhealthily so. I was almost 10 at the time, so I imagined that she couldn't have been older than that. The way she was bundled up in so many layers of clothes made her look uncomfortable and gave her an uneven, lumpy shape. I assumed, at the time, that she was poor, maybe even homeless. Instead of walking past each other, we simply stopped in front of one another. Something compelled me to stare down at her, and she looked up at me with a sort of vague expectation. Her hats and scarf covered most of her face, leaving only her eyes and part of her cheeks visible. Her eyes were big and dark, like black holes against her pale skin and the surrounding snow. I lost myself in her stare, like I was falling into her eyes. It was like I was in some sort of trance, pulled to her without realizing it, made utterly passive. She took her earmuffs off, but didn't speak. "Hi," I said weakly, not knowing what to say. She looked me up and down, and something about that made me shiver, even in the cold. It was like she was taking stock of me, of what I had to offer. Before I could ask what she wanted, the girl held her hands up. They were pale, shaking, bare. The girl didn't have any gloves. Something about the way she looked at me so impatiently made me look down at my own gloved hands. I didn't have a particularly good set of gloves, but they were the only pair I had. I looked at her again, and something about her big, dark eyes made me want to give them to her. I took my gloves off and held them out for her to take. I almost regretted it, but then her freezing hand touched my bare skin as she took them, and they were so cold that I knew I was doing the right thing. She put the gloves on, looked up, and smiled. The scarf was still covering most of her face, but I could see it in how her cheeks raised up, and in the sparkle of her eyes. As she started to walk past me, I realized that the blizzard was easing up. I put my glasses on, turned around, and looked at the girl. She had stopped walking, and was staring down at the gloves, admiring them. "Merry Christmas," I mumbled to myself, and she looked back at me, almost as if she could hear me over the wind. I waved, realized my hands were cold, and shoved them into my jacket pockets. She nodded and turned around, continuing her walk to wherever she was going, but not in any sort of hurry. I was only a block away from my house, so my hands weren't cold for very long. When I walked inside, my mother immediately noticed that they were missing. For some reason, I didn't tell her the truth, despite how chivalrous it would have made me sound. I lied, suggesting that I must have forgotten them at my friend's house, and went up to my room. Something about the girl made me want to keep our interaction private, like it was something special. I sat down on my bed and mulled over what I just experienced. I didn't exactly have a crush on the girl, but something about the way she stared at me was so compelling, like I was defenseless against it. I wanted to see her again. I looked out from my bedroom window, somehow expecting to see the girl, and she was there, on the other side of the street. It was like she'd been waiting for me. I opened my window, blasted by cold air, and waved at her. She waved back, then started walking away. I watched her walk out of view, wondering who she was, where she had come from, and if she was ever there at all. Something about her felt unreal, like I'd vividly imagined her. I'd hoped to see her again that winter, but never did. Whenever I went outside, shoving my hands into my pockets, I wondered if she still had the gloves. Whenever I got home, I checked my window to see if she was standing on the other side of the street again, waiting for me. I daydreamed about running into her during one of my walks, which just so happened to become much more frequent, but I never saw her, not as a child. Anyway, that year was memorably cold. Blizzards moved in and out, roads were all slick with ice, and inches of snow fell every day. We always had some snow, but that year was bad. This winter's been pretty heavy so far, but not on that level. We've had a lot of snow and ice, but no blizzards, yet. It's the perfect kind of winter for long walks in the snow. Last week, I was enjoying the season and going on a long walk. It was snowing lightly, and the sky was a solid white of clouds. It was a very peaceful walk at first, but then I saw something in the distance on the other side of the street. It was a girl, short and bundled up in layers of winter clothing. Most of the clothes were different, but the red scarf brought me right back to that meeting a decade before. It was her. I'd been obsessed with this girl as a child, reminded of her every winter for years. It was like opening a time capsule of memories, buried in the back of my mind since I was in middle school. But at the same time, it was more than memories. She was standing right across the street, in mostly different clothes, but the girl was the same size, the same height, like she hadn't aged a day. I was lost in that impossible thought, wondering if she was just really short and petite, when I realized that she was crossing the street and heading in my direction. Does she recognize me? I wondered. I couldn't move, and I didn't want to. Something was so disarming about the surreal side of this girl from 10 years ago. I remembered wondering, as a child, if I'd imagined her. Hadn't she followed me home and waved at me from across the street? Did I just make that up and forget that it wasn't true? She stopped right in front of me and looked up. I remembered how I looked down into her large eyes, so dark that they looked black against the white of her face and the snow, and here we were again. I was an adult, and sure enough, she was still a child. Her scarf still covered up her lower face, but I could see from the upper half that she looked exactly the same, like she walked through time to see me again. However, the clothes had aged. Her scarf was worn and stained, her jackets ripped in some places. She had a different pair of gloves that looked fairly new, and I wondered if some young boy gave them to her. Did he also think that he imagined her? She looked me up and down, and I remembered that she did the same thing last time. Taking stock, I assumed, in the moment, that she was looking for something to ask me for, another article of clothing to keep her warm, and I was right. She settled on my scarf, and she lightly tugged on it, as if demanding it. I pulled off my scarf, ignoring how cold it made my neck, and handed it over. There was something so strange about the experience that I just felt like I had to go with it, if only to see where it was going. Like before, I was compelled by something in her stare to do what she wanted. I was transfixed by this impossible girl. Then she removed her red scarf, and I almost let myself scream. The skin of her mouth and chin were stained red, and large fangs jutted down from amongst her upper teeth. She looked up as she dropped her old scarf on the ground and started putting mine around her neck, giggling at the sight of my fear. I was grateful when she covered her mouth with my scarf, but still terrified. I was glued to the spot, but desperately wanted to run. She'd had a sort of disarming aura about her, but it was gone, replaced by danger. I felt compelled to get away from this bloody-mouthed child, but frozen in place at the same time. She laughed again, the light and innocent joy of youth. And then she spoke. I remember you. Did you move? I shook my head silently, otherwise unable to move. I couldn't stop staring at her eyes. At first, I'd assumed that they were brown and simply looked darker in contrast to the light, but now I could see the endless pits of blackness in her eyes. I could feel a sort of force moving from her eyes to me, compelling me to stay put and do what she wanted. She had me under her spell, and she knew it. It was funny to her. "Oh, I think I remember where you live, then," she said before giggling again. "Thanks for the scarf and the gloves. Stay warm." She walked past me. I heard her footsteps in the snow get further away, but couldn't will myself to turn around. I didn't want to see her right behind me, admiring her new scarf as she'd admired the gloves I gave her a decade ago. Would I have waved at her, too, if she was there? I imagined that I would have, if I had the feeling that it was what she wanted. When I got home, I locked the doors and windows, willing myself not to look out and see if she was waiting for me again, like she had been the first time. I haven't left the house since. I've tried to convince myself that she was imaginary, but I'd rather be terrified than let myself believe that I'm crazy. My mom asked me if I was okay yesterday. I brushed it off and asked her about the heavy winter a decade before. She recalled that it was particularly bad, even worse than they thought at the time. When I asked what she meant, she told me that the local news kept running stories that following spring about a few missing people who'd been found after the snow all melted away, dead on the side of the road, as if they'd just keeled over and been covered by the snow without anyone noticing. My mom remembered that one of the missing was from this side of town. I've since looked into it, and this side of town is really only a mile or so away from our home. The article I found mentioned that the person who discovered that body mentioned that there was dried blood on their coat and neck, like they'd cut themselves falling and bled to death right by the sidewalk. I have my own theories. You may be wondering why I'm staying indoors when the girl from the snowstorm knows where I live. The thing is, I'm not sure she can enter my home without an invitation. Either way, I'm not going to risk going outside again. Not that I have the courage to in the first place. I can barely will myself to look out the window at this point. I don't know what to do besides share my experience with all of you, in the hopes that you're also careful this winter. Even if you're not a local, there's no telling how many of these things are out there. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comment section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.